Last week, I told the story about the weird encounter during my last stay at my sister's house. The story was called My Dog Doesn't Bark. Since then, I have been gathering information about the paranormal, searching for answers to why these things happened at my stay. It also made me realize my current situation. You see, I live in an old building made to house 14 students. But after some digging, I realized I live in an old haunted Nazi building where strange things happen to those that live there. To make you understand more of what kind of building this is, I will first offer you the dark history of this place. In 1940, during the Second World War, the Germans bombed Rotterdam to the ground. Almost all the buildings were destroyed, including the building that stood before this one. Then, in 1941, they rebuilt this large place under the command of the Nazis. There is not much known about the use of this place during the war, only that a lot of people went in and only a few came out. When the war was almost won and the Allies came to retake Rotterdam, the sky was black with smoke coming from this place, a big fire in the yard, destroying all the evidence. When the war ended, so did the horrible things that happened in this building. The authorities could not state what really happened here. Only a few documents were ever found naming 6 SS soldiers and 1 Nazi scientist. It was important information used by the Allies to find these men and trial them for crimes against humanity. The wanted men were eventually all found in different places in the world. Some moved to Austria, 3 moved to Argentina, and 1 even moved to Hong Kong. The strange thing was that all the Nazi men had hanged themselves with their eyes covered. It was some kind of suicide pact that makes you wonder why they would even move to another country in the first place. The building itself would be destroyed, but because Rotterdam was bombed and many people were homeless, they let the building stay so that people could live in it. The only problem was that no one wanted to live in this place. People claimed it was haunted by the atrocities that happened there. People stated that cries and weeping were to be heard, but if one looked for the source, they could not find it. Eventually, a foreigner, unknown to its past, bought the building and made a newspaper company. When he heard the stories about the hauntings, he just ignored it. He never heard the cries or the weeping and discarded as scary bedtime stories. He later recalled that buying this place was the worst decision in his life. At the time, it was an ideal place for a newspaper company. The first floor was large enough to house a tenfold of journalists and editors. On ground level, there was a large space where the newspapers could be printed and stacked. The basement itself was large and pitch black. The darkness made it an ideal place to develop photographs in red light. The only real light that could light the place came from the lamps hanging on the ceiling, but those things almost never worked. The photo development team had to carry a flashlight at all times, but even those malfunctioned many times. At first, the newspaper became a big hit. Many people loved stories that were written. Most of the stories were about the innovation that made life easier to live. Only after a while, the stories became less and less positive and darker. Eventually, the stories were all about the ways new technology could kill you in an instant. It was disturbing how many times the word kill was written in one article. This was, of course, not very popular with the people, and they demanded an explanation. Apparently, all the journalists and editors that worked at the newspaper suffered some kind of depression. It became so depraved, many journalists committed suicide. The others became crazy and had to go to an institution that could help them. The people working with the printers on the ground level did not have a dream job either. There were way too many accidents happening. A perfect working printer would suddenly be malfunctioning. Then the poor sucker who had to fix it would suddenly come to the realization that the printer started working again while his hand was still in the machine. Many workers lost their hands or leg because of some strange things happened. But that was not even the worst injury. A strange sickness had gripped the man working there. The sickness made the workers drink ink, gallons of ink. The ink would damage every organ in their body until they died in a horrible way. There is not much known about the people that worked in the basement, only that they were the first to complain about strange things happening there. It started mildly. Someone's glasses were found on a different spot, and so on. Then it became even worse. Seeing strange faces and hearing strange noises in the dark. Eventually, they protested going down there, but were forced by the manager. This all stopped when a few workers went missing down there. The other people quit their jobs and never returned to the building again. The owner did not want this all to become public, so he did his best off hiding its secrets. After a while, the accidents and the strange things became too big, and the once successful newspaper company got shut down. The owner was later found hanged with his eyes covered. Nobody wanted to buy the building, so they auctioned it. A man who bought all kinds of different buildings bought this place for a cheap price. He wanted to place another business in it, but after visiting the building, he never did anything with it. Eventually, the man passed away, and his cousin, an old hag, inherited the place. She decided to turn the first floor into student room and rent them for a cheap price. The old hag did not want to put too much effort into the place, so she hired my neighbor to look out for it. He would get a small price and he could store his precious old-timers on ground level. My neighbor did this job for a while. He came many times to the building admiring his old-timers. He spends so much time with these cars that he not only neglected the building, but also his marriage. That changed one day when he stayed a little bit too long admiring his cars. No one knows exactly what happened that night, but he was never the same man again. The people who lived on the first floor told me they heard strange noises that night coming from the ground floor. They later saw my neighbor run for his life as if he were being chased by a lion. After the events that night, he sold his old-timers and never spent much time again near the building. He never stayed more than an hour at the building. Even when he showed me my room, he seemed very off and unusual. He even told me that if there was a better option, I should take it. But I had no choice. My father threatened to kick me out of the house. I needed a room to stay in. I took the room. But after 3 years of living in it, I am desperately searching for a better place. I now live in room 3 of the 14 rooms that are available. It is a small room, but livable. I never was much around in my room. It gave me the creeps, especially because of my neighbor, who is mentally ill. She used to be up all night doing the craziest stuff imaginable. At one point, she became so crazy that she banged her head against the shower, screaming and yelling that the voices had to come out. That was finally the moment she got institutionalized. But after 6 months, they sent her back, giving her a cocktail of strong sedative pills. She still acts very weirdly, but she is calmer and does not bang her head anymore. Still, I was uneased at this place, so most of my time I spent at my parents' or my girlfriend's house. I was there only 2 times a week now, but Corona changed all that. Now, I am stuck here, and because I am here now 24/7, I understand why they call it a haunted place. The first week of my Corona stay began already weird. A roommate from room 13 was looking through the mail on the post table in the middle of the hallway. He suddenly saw a flash of light coming from the elevator behind the post table. The elevator was built during the time the building acted as a newspaper company. Over time, the elevator broke down and they removed it, leaving only the unused elevator shaft. There was, however, a small, round window where one could look into the darkness of the elevator shaft. It was too dark to see anything, but still, my roommate tried to see where that flash of light came from. He then took out his phone and used the flashlight so he could see better. I have to say, I never heard such a scared scream in my life. I immediately ran out of the room to see what was happening, just as many other of my roommates did. At first, I did not see anything, but on a closer look, I saw my roommate crawled up in a fetus position under the post table, crying. His face was as pale as a snowman, and his phone laid shattered on the cold floor. He was shouting that a face was looking at him. It was obvious he was panicking. When he calmed down, he told us to look through the elevator glass. I took my phone and looked. At first, I did not see anything and thought he was overreacting. I almost stopped looking until I saw some red paint dripping down the elevator shaft. Then I looked clear and 2 red handprints coming down the elevator shaft illuminated themselves as I pointed my light at them, as if it were straight from a horror movie. He told us he saw the black ink hands that made these handprints going down, and then he pointed the light down. he saw a deformed face coming up the elevator shaft in such a fast move that he dropped his phone. When my roommate stood up, you could see a big wet spot on his pants. That night, he packed his stuff and went to his parents. He still has not returned. The police came eventually to analyze the blood. When they opened the elevator shaft, a horrible stench filled the building. It did not take long before they found the remains of what seemed to be human. A whole search unit came trying to figure out why a body was found in the elevator. After a week, the police didn't find anything suspicious in the building. They only said that we should keep the door in the basement locked for some reason. The human remains appeared to be from one of the photo developers during the newspaper time. The autopsy stated that the person had died from severe trauma. The person who did the autopsy stated that he had never seen such a horrible thing in his life, and he worked there for 30 years. I thought the police officer who told us this made a sick joke, but he was dead serious. The weeks after the elevator event was even more disturbing. One day all the showers leaked black liquid. One girl leaving in the building got soaked in this awful stuff and developed a horrible rash. Then a few days later, a big hole in the ceiling was created because too many dead rats had strangely piled up at that place, and the ceiling could not hold its weight anymore. Then at last, one of the other girls living in the building had committed suicide. She was discovered by her best friend. Sadly enough, I walked past the open door as they removed the body. I still cannot get the awful image out of my head. She, just like all the other suicides, had covered her eyes. I really wanted to leave this place. Summer was almost beginning, and I already had arranged that I would watch my sister's house and dog, but before I could leave, the plumbing broke. I called my old neighbor, and he sends some plumbers to help fix it. Apparently, the mentally ill woman living next to me had washed down all her hair through the sink. The blockage was so immense that they had to open the pipes beneath the first floor. The plumbers did not like the place and asked me if I wanted to stay close. It was my first time on the ground level. The place looked very old and neglected. While they were busy cleaning the pipes, I looked around and got drawn to one door. It was in the middle of the building. For some reason, I opened the door and stared into the darkness. A fear so strange came down my spine. I just couldn't move. I stared into the abyss. When my eyes got more used to the darkness, I clearly saw something large move up the stairs. Each second, it came closer and closer, yet it did not make any sound. I remember I just could not move as the thing crept closer. It looked also real. But when one of the plumbers touched my shoulder, I snapped out of this strange illusion. I looked down the stairs and did not see anything anymore. I closed the door and left this awful place. The plumbing was fixed and the plumbers left quickly. From that point on, I had it enough with this place and went gladly to my sister's house. Sadly enough, that experience wasn't too well either. Now I am back in my room, sitting here idly by, waiting for the next strange thing to happen. The owner does not allow new people to rent rooms. More and more people are leaving this place. I hope that one day I can leave this place as well, because I know that if I stay too long here, I will certainly not survive this.